Amara stood in the bridal suite, her hands trembling as she adjusted the delicate lace on her wedding dress. Through the ornate French doors, she could hear the murmur of 300 guests settling into their seats. The venue was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, white roses cascaded down marble columns, and a string quartet played softly in the background. Everything was perfect, except for one devastating detail. The man waiting for her at the altar planned to destroy her in front of everyone. Her phone buzzed on the vanity table. She glanced at the screen, her heart pounding. It was a message from her best friend Maya, who was stationed near the entrance. "He's here. Look smug. Are you sure about this?" Amara's fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed back a single word. "Yes." She took a deep breath and studied her reflection in the floor-length mirror. The woman staring back at her looked radiant. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, her makeup was flawless, and her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo with pearl pins scattered throughout. She looked like a bride who had everything. But beneath the composed exterior, her mind was racing through every detail of what was about to unfold. 3 weeks ago, her world had shattered in the span of 60 seconds. She had been at David Cooper's penthouse, using his laptop to look up a recipe for dinner. A message notification had popped up on the screen. It was from his mother, Eleanor Cooper. "Darling, I know this is difficult, but we've discussed this. She's not one of us. The plan is set for the wedding day. Make it public, make it clean, and we'll handle the rest. The family's reputation depends on this." Amara's hands had frozen on the keyboard. She had read the message 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding about the follow-up messages. David had responded, "I know, Mother. I'll do it at the altar, right before the vows. It'll be humiliating enough that she'll never speak about our family again. Then I'll be free to marry Rebecca like we planned." Rebecca, his assistant. The woman who had been at every family dinner, every business meeting, every supposedly important event that Amara couldn't attend because she wouldn't understand the corporate talk. The pieces had fallen into place with sickening clarity. She had taken screenshots of everything, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Then she had closed the laptop, finished making dinner, and acted like nothing had happened when David came home. That night, lying next to him in bed, she felt like she was drowning. David Cooper, the man who had swept into her life 18 months ago with his charming smile and generous gestures, had never loved her. He had played her, used her, and now he planned to humiliate her in the most public way possible. She had cried silently in the bathroom, her hand pressed against her mouth to muffle the sobs. By morning, she had made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. She would let him think he had one, and then she would burn his world to the ground. The past 3 weeks had been a masterclass in deception. Amara had continued planning the wedding with enthusiasm, smiling through cake tastings and dress fittings while David's mother made snide comments about keeping things modest and not drawing too much attention. She had listened to David's sweet lies about their future together, his promises of children and a home in the Hamptons, all while knowing he was texting Rebecca about their real plans. Every smile had been a weapon. Every affectionate gesture had been armor. And every night, when David fell asleep, Amara had worked on her counterattack. Step 1 had been gathering evidence. She had gone through David's emails, his text messages, his call logs. She had found months of correspondence between him and Rebecca, explicit photos, hotel reservations, expensive gifts charged to credit cards Amara hadn't known existed. She had discovered that Eleanor Cooper had orchestrated the entire relationship from the beginning. David had met Amara at a charity event, but what she hadn't known was that his mother had sent him there specifically to find someone unsuitable to date temporarily. The plan had always been for him to have a public relationship with someone outside their social circle, then dump her dramatically and return to Rebecca, the daughter of another wealthy family. It was all about optics, about proving to the board of Cooper Enterprises that David was mature enough to make hard decisions, even in his personal life. The cruelty of it had nearly broken her. But Amara had kept digging. She had found recordings of family dinners where Eleanor and David had laughed about her background, mocked her career in tech, and made racist jokes about her appearance. She had found legal documents showing that David had actually drafted a public statement to release after the wedding, painting himself as the victim of a gold digger who had trapped him into an engagement. Every piece of evidence had been carefully compiled, backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts, and organized into a devastating presentation. Step 2 had been building her team. Maya had been her first recruit. Her best friend since college, Maya worked as an investigative journalist and had connections throughout the media industry. When Amara had shown her the evidence, Maya's face had gone pale with rage. "We're taking him down," she had said immediately. All of them. Together, they had reached out to other allies. There was Jennifer, who ran a women's empowerment organization and had been looking for a case that would highlight the intersection of classism and misogyny in corporate America. There was Marcus, a former business partner of David's who had been forced out of a deal by the Cooper family and had his own axe to grind. And then there was the most important piece of the puzzle, the one that would transform this from personal revenge into professional victory. 3 months earlier, Amara had been contacted by Titanium Industries, a major competitor of Cooper Enterprises. They had been impressed by her work in tech development and wanted to offer her a position as a consultant. She had turned them down at the time, not wanting to create any conflict with David's family business. But when she had reached out to them 2 weeks ago with a proposal, they had listened very carefully. Amara had insider knowledge of Cooper Enterprises' upcoming product launches, their financial vulnerabilities, and their corporate strategy. She had absorbed all of it during months of family dinners and business discussions that David had assumed she was too unsophisticated to understand. Titanium Industries had made her an offer. If she could deliver a public relations disaster that would tank Cooper Enterprises' stock value and distract their executive team, Titanium would hire her as a senior consultant with a salary that made her current job look like minimum wage. They would also position her as the face of their new initiative promoting diversity and inclusion in corporate leadership. It was perfect. Poetic even. David wanted to humiliate her to protect his family's image. She would destroy that image completely while launching herself into a career that would make her more successful than he had ever been. Step 3 had been setting the stage. Amara had insisted on inviting several key people to the wedding, people David had initially objected to but eventually agreed to when she had played the role of the sweet, naive bride who just wanted to share their special day. She had invited board members from Cooper Enterprises, major investors, 3 prominent journalists including Maya, representatives from several women's organizations, and, crucially, executives from Titanium Industries. She had also upgraded the wedding's technology package, insisting on large screens for a slideshow presentation, professional sound equipment, and live streaming capabilities. David had been annoyed by the expense, but had ultimately signed off on it, too focused on his own plans to question hers. Step 4 had been the hardest, strengthening herself emotionally. Amara had started seeing a therapist, Dr. Chin, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She hadn't told Dr. Chin everything about her plan, but she had worked through the devastating emotions of discovering that the man she loved had never loved her back. The sessions had helped her understand that David's betrayal wasn't a reflection of her worth, but of his character. She had practiced the speech she would give, rehearsing it until her voice no longer shook, until she could deliver every word with calm dignity. She had built herself back up from the broken woman who had cried in the bathroom to someone who could walk into the fire without flinching. Step 5 had been the final rehearsal, the last run-through of every detail. The presentation was loaded and password protected on the venue's computer system. Maya had copies as backup. The journalists knew to start recording at a specific signal. The Titanium Industries representatives were briefed on when to make their announcement. Amara had practiced walking in heels for hours because she refused to stumble when she walked away. She had written and rewritten her speech, cutting out anything that sounded like pleading or weakness, leaving only truth and power. Everything was ready. Now, standing in the bridal suite, Amara felt surprisingly calm. The panic and heartbreak of 3 weeks ago had been transformed into something else, something cold and focused. She picked up her bouquet of white peonies and checked her phone one last time. Messages flooded in from her team. In position. Cameras ready. We've got your back. She smiled, a real smile this time, and opened the door. Her father was waiting in the hallway, distinguished in his rented tuxedo. He had worked double shifts as a mechanic his entire life to give her opportunities, to send her to a good college, to make sure she never felt limited by their modest background. When he saw her, his eyes filled with tears. "Baby girl, you look beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you ready?" Amara linked her arm through his and squeezed gently. "I'm ready, Dad." As they walked toward the ceremony space, she could hear the music changing, the signal that the bride was about to enter. Her father looked at her with concern. "You seem different today. Calmer than I expected. Are you nervous?" She shook her head. "No, Dad. I'm not nervous. I know exactly what's about to happen." He frowned, confused, but before he could ask what she meant, the doors opened. The ceremony space was even more beautiful than she remembered. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the hundreds of flowers and the faces of the guests who turned to watch her entrance. At the front of the aisle, David stood in his custom-tailored tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile confident. He looked like every woman's dream. Handsome, wealthy, successful. But Amara could see the calculation in his eyes, the barely concealed smugness. He thought this was his moment of triumph. Next to him, his best man checked his watch nervously. Eleanor Cooper sat in the front row, her expression carefully neutral, but Amara caught the slight smirk on her face. Rebecca was seated 6 rows back, wearing a navy dress and trying to look inconspicuous. Amara noted every detail as she walked down the aisle. The walk felt both endless and too short. Her father's arm was steady beneath hers, and she focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on maintaining her composure. When they reached the altar, her father kissed her cheek and whispered, "I love you, sweetheart." Then he took his seat next to her mother, who was crying happy tears, completely unaware of what was coming. Amara turned to face David. He took her hands, and his touch made her skin crawl. But she smiled at him, the perfect bride. The officiant, a friend of the Cooper family, began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of David Alexander Cooper and Amara Michelle Johnson. His voice droned on about love and commitment, words that felt hollow in the face of what Amara knew. She watched David's face, saw the moment his expression shifted slightly. He was preparing himself. His mother had probably given him some signal. This was it. He was about to make his move. But Amara was faster. As the officiant reached the part about objections, she squeezed David's hands and spoke clearly. "Actually, before we continue, I'd like to say something." The officiant looked confused. "Ms. Johnson, that's not usually part of the ceremony." David's eyes widened slightly in alarm, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "Darling, maybe we should wait until after the vows." His voice was patronizing, the tone he used when he thought she was being silly or emotional. It made her anger sharpen into something crystalline and cold. "No," she said firmly, projecting her voice so everyone could hear. "I think everyone needs to hear this now." She turned to face the audience, still holding David's hands so he couldn't easily walk away. 3 weeks ago, I discovered something that changed everything. I found out that the man standing next to me, the man I was about to marry, had been planning to humiliate me today. Right here. Right now. In front of all of you. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. David tried to pull his hands away, but she held firm. "Amara, what are you doing?" His voice was low and threatening. "Stop this right now." She ignored him. "You see, David and his mother Eleanor had a plan. I was never supposed to actually become part of this family. I was a pawn in a game about image and reputation. They wanted him to date someone like me, someone from outside their social circle, someone they considered beneath them, so he could publicly reject me and prove he was capable of making tough decisions. Then he would marry Rebecca, his assistant, the woman he's actually been sleeping with for the past year." The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped in shock and confusion. Eleanor Cooper stood up, her face white with fury. "This is absurd. David, stop her." But David seemed frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Rebecca had gone pale, half standing as if she might run. Amara released David's hands and walked to where Maya was standing near the presentation equipment. "I'm sure you all think I'm being dramatic, that I'm a scorned woman making accusations. So let me show you the evidence." She nodded to Maya, who entered the password. The large screens flickered to life. The first image was a text message exchange between David and his mother. Eleanor's words were crystal clear. "She's not one of us. Make it public, make it clean." David's response: "I'll do it at the altar. It'll be humiliating enough that she'll never speak about our family again." The audience read in stunned silence. Then came more messages, weeks of them, David and Rebecca planning their real future together while he lied to Amara. Photos of them together at hotels, receipts for expensive jewelry that Amara had never received. Then came the audio files. Eleanor's voice filled the room, recorded at a family dinner Amara had secretly documented on her phone. Honestly, David, I don't understand why you brought that girl around. She's pretty enough, I suppose, but she has no breeding, no refinement. And her family. What does her father do? Works on cars. Laughter. David's voice, the voice that had whispered sweet things to Amara in the dark, joined in. I know, Mother. But that's exactly the point. When I dump her, the board will see I can prioritize the family business over personal entanglements. It's all part of the plan. More laughter. Then Eleanor again. Well, make sure she doesn't cause a scene when you do it. These people can be so emotional. The racism was barely veiled, and it hung in the air like poison. Amara watched the faces in the crowd, saw the investors shifting uncomfortably, saw the journalists typing rapidly on their phones, saw her parents holding each other in confusion and pain. She walked back to the center of the space, her heels clicking on the marble floor. David had finally found his voice. This is taken out of context. You're twisting everything. His face was red, panic breaking through his usual composed exterior. I love you, Amara. This is all a misunderstanding. She looked at him with something close to pity. No, David. You never loved me. And honestly, I'm grateful for that now. Because if you were capable of love, if you had actually cared about me, this would hurt so much more. She turned back to the audience. I spent 3 weeks debating whether to go through with today. Part of me wanted to just cancel everything and disappear. But then I realized something. Men like David, families like the Coopers, they rely on silence. They rely on their victims being too ashamed or too afraid to speak up. They count on people like me to quietly go away. Her voice grew stronger. But I'm not going away. And I'm not staying silent. Because this isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been told they don't belong, that they're not good enough, that they should be grateful for whatever scraps they're thrown by people who see them as less than human. She gestured to the screens where a new image had appeared. It was the draft press release David had written, the one that painted Amara as a manipulative gold digger. David had this prepared. He was going to send it to every major news outlet after he dumped me. He was going to destroy my reputation to protect his own. Eleanor finally found her voice. You have no right. We could sue you for defamation. Amara smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Defamation requires that the statements be false, Eleanor. Everything I've shown today is documented, verified, and backed up in multiple locations. But please do try to sue me. I'm sure your lawyers would love to have all of this presented in open court. She paused, letting that sink in. But I'm not done. You see, while I was learning about your plans for me, I was making plans of my own. Maya handed her a folder. Amara opened it and pulled out a document. I've spent the past 3 weeks consulting with Titanium Industries, Cooper Enterprises' biggest competitor. I've provided them with detailed information about your upcoming product launches, your financial vulnerabilities, and your corporate strategy. All information that was freely discussed at family dinners and business meetings where you all assumed I was too stupid to understand what you were talking about. David's face went from red to white. You can't do that. That's industrial espionage. Amara shook her head. No, it's not. I was never an employee of Cooper Enterprises. I signed no confidentiality agreements. I was simply a girlfriend who listened while her boyfriend bragged about his work. There's no law against me using publicly discussed information in my own career." She turned to where the titanium industry's executives were seated. "As of today, I'm joining Titanium Industries as a senior consultant. I'll be heading up their new diversity and inclusion initiative, working to ensure that corporations can't treat people as disposable props in their image games." The executives nodded, and one of them stood and began to clap. Others joined in, slowly at first, then building. Not everyone was clapping. Eleanor looked like she might faint. Rebecca was crying. Several of the Cooper family friends sat in rigid silence. But the investors, the board members, they were looking at David with expressions that ranged from disappointment to fury. Amara walked over to her parents. Her mother was crying, but now they were different tears. Her father stood and pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "So damn proud." She hugged him back, letting herself feel the warmth of his support, the love that had always been real and unconditional. Then she returned to center stage, where David still stood like a statue. "Want to be very clear about something," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent room. "I didn't do this for revenge. I mean, yes, there's definitely satisfaction in watching your plans crumble. But more than that, I did this because I refuse to let your cruelty define me. I refuse to be the woman who is too ashamed to fight back. And I refuse to let the next woman you target be blindsided the way I almost was." She looked directly at Rebecca. "By the way, Rebecca, if you're still planning to marry him after all this, I suggest you get a very good prenuptial agreement. And maybe invest in therapy. Because a man who can lie this easily to one woman will absolutely lie to the next." Rebecca stood abruptly and fled toward the exit, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. Several guests watched her go, then turned back to the unfolding drama. David finally seemed to shake off his paralysis. He stepped toward Amara, his voice desperate. "Please, can we talk about this privately? There's so much you don't understand." She took a step back. "No, David. I understand perfectly. You chose cruelty. You chose to see me as something less than human, something you could use and discard. You made that choice. Now you get to live with the consequences." She turned one last time to address the crowd. "I know many of you came here today expecting a wedding. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I hope instead you witnessed something more important. You witnessed what happens when someone refuses to accept the role others have written for them. You witnessed what happens when silence is broken. And for those of you who work with Cooper Enterprises, I hope you think very carefully about the values of the people running that company." The journalists were still filming, still typing. The live stream had been active the entire time. Maya had made sure of that. This wasn't just reaching the 300 people in this room. It was reaching thousands online, maybe hundreds of thousands by now. Eleanor stood and pointed a shaking finger at Amara. "You've destroyed him. You've destroyed our family." Amara met her gaze steadily. "No, Eleanor. You and David destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone could see it." She walked toward the exit, her head high, her steps steady. As she passed the rows of guests, some reached out to touch her arm, to whisper words of support. Others looked away uncomfortably. She didn't care about either reaction. She had done what she came here to do. In the hallway outside the ceremony space, she finally let herself take a deep breath. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and a strange sense of lightness. Maya appeared beside her, phone in hand. It's already viral. The footage is everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, social media, everywhere. People are calling it the wedding speech of the year. She showed Amara her phone, where thousands of comments were flooding in. She's my hero. This is what courage looks like. David Cooper is trash. Eleanor Cooper should be ashamed. Titanium Industries just got the best consultant in the industry. Amara scrolled through a few comments, then handed the phone back. I need to get out of this dress. Maya nodded and led her to a private room where she had stashed a change of clothes. As Amara peeled off the wedding dress, she felt like she was shedding not just the gown, but the entire version of herself who had believed in David Cooper's lies. She pulled on jeans, a simple black blazer, and comfortable flats. When she looked in the mirror this time, she saw someone different. Stronger. Freer. Her phone rang. It was her new boss at Titanium Industries. Amara, that was extraordinary. I know today was difficult, but I want you to know that you have our full support. The board has already approved additional funding for the diversity initiative. We want you to build something real, something lasting. She thanked him and ended the call. Then came another call, this time from a major news network asking for an interview. Then another from a publisher interested in her story. The messages kept coming, opportunities flooding in, the world opening up in ways she hadn't imagined. Over the next few weeks, the fallout from the wedding continued to spread like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Cooper Enterprises stock dropped by 30% in the first week. 3 major investors pulled their funding, citing concerns about the company's leadership and values. Board members called emergency meetings. David was forced to step down from his position as vice president. Eleanor Cooper released a statement claiming the family had been unfairly attacked, but it only made things worse. The internet had no sympathy for billionaires who treated people as disposable. Rebecca quietly resigned from her position at Cooper Enterprises and moved to another state. Rumors circulated that she and David had broken up, that she blamed him for not protecting her from the public exposure. David himself seemed to disappear from public view. His social media accounts went dark. Friends reported that he was taking time to reflect, which everyone understood meant hiding from the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, Amara's life transformed in ways she couldn't have predicted. The diversity initiative at Titanium Industries became one of the most talked about corporate programs in the country. She was invited to speak at conferences, to write articles, to share her story with audiences who saw her as a symbol of standing up to institutional cruelty. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Amara sat in her new corner office, looking out at the city's skyline. Her career had skyrocketed beyond anything she had achieved at her previous tech job. She was making more money than she had ever imagined, working on projects that actually mattered, surrounded by colleagues who respected her expertise. But more than the professional success, she had gained something invaluable. She had reclaimed her dignity. She had proven to herself that she was stronger than she knew, that she could face betrayal and choose to rise rather than break. Her phone buzzed with a message from Maya. Dinner tonight? I want to hear about the new project. Amara smiled and typed back a yes. She had learned many things from the disaster with David Cooper. She had learned that love without respect is worthless. She had learned that silence protects abusers and speaking out protects future victims. She had learned that her worth had never been determined by whether the Cooper family accepted her. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full of purpose and success that the people who tried to destroy you become irrelevant. She thought about the woman she had been 18 months ago when she first met David. That woman had been hopeful, maybe a little naive, believing that love could bridge any gap. She didn't regret having been that person, but she was grateful to be who she was now. Someone who understood that real strength wasn't about never being hurt. It was about what you chose to do when the hurt came. It was about refusing to let cruelty have the final word. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Amara opened her laptop and started working on her next presentation. It was about creating accountability in corporate culture, about ensuring that the next generation of leaders understood that people weren't props or pawns, but individuals deserving of basic dignity. It was work that mattered. Work that would outlast the viral moment of that wedding day and create real change. Somewhere across the city, David Cooper was probably still dealing with the wreckage of his choices. Eleanor Cooper was probably still trying to salvage the family reputation. Rebecca was probably building a new life, hopefully one where she had learned something about self-worth. But their stories were no longer Amara's concern. She had given them enough of her time, enough of her energy, enough of her tears. Now she was focused on her own story, on writing the chapters that came after betrayal, the ones about resilience and triumph. Before she left the office that evening, she posted a photo on social media. It was just her, standing in front of the Titanium Industries logo, smiling genuinely. The caption read, "6 months ago, someone tried to break me in the most public way possible. Today, I'm stronger than I've ever been." To everyone who's been underestimated, dismissed, or betrayed, your story doesn't end with their cruelty. It begins after. Keep going. Keep rising. Your voice matters. The post went viral within hours. Thousands of comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of overcoming betrayal, of standing up to those who had tried to diminish them. It became bigger than just her story. It became a moment of collective recognition that so many people had been where she had been, feeling small and powerless, and had found their way back to strength. If you've made it this far in Amara's story, thank you for taking this journey with us. Her courage in the face of calculated cruelty is a reminder that our voices, our truths, and our dignity are worth fighting for. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you or someone you know faced a similar betrayal? How did you overcome it? Your stories matter, and this community is here to support each other. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on more powerful stories like this one. Remember, you're never alone in your struggles, and sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let anyone's cruelty define your worth. Until next time, keep rising.